Zuri had always imagined what her engagement day would look like, but the reality was even more magical. In the heart of Kigali, surrounded by the hills that always seemed to smile back at her, she stood beside Kwame, the man she believed was her dream come true. The celebration was grand, filled with music, dancing, and the smell of delicious food drifting through the evening air. Family members laughed, friends clapped along to the drums, and every eye in the room sparkled with joy for the young couple. Zuri's heart swelled with pride as she looked at Kwame. He was charming in every way, greeting her relatives with warmth, making jokes that had everyone laughing, and holding her hand as if she was the most precious person in the world. People whispered about how lucky she was to have found such a caring, handsome man, and Zuri believed it with all her heart. She had never felt so adored, so chosen. The ring on her finger glimmered under the soft lights, a symbol of a future she thought would be filled with love and security. She smiled until her cheeks hurt, letting herself imagine the life ahead, the wedding, the children, the home they would build together. But while she was lost in this happiness, she had no idea that behind Kwame's easy smile and tender gestures, secrets were tucked away. For now, though, Zuri only saw perfection, not realizing that her fairy tale had cracks waiting to show. At first, Zuri didn't notice anything unusual. She was too busy enjoying the glow of being engaged, answering endless congratulations, and diving into wedding plans. But slowly, little things began to catch her attention. Kwame was never without his phone, which wasn't strange on its own, but the way he guarded it was different. If she walked into the room while he was on a call, his voice would drop to a whisper. If she leaned close to glance at a message, he'd quickly tilt the screen away or tuck the phone into his pocket. Zuri tried to push the thoughts aside. Every couple had small secrets, she told herself. Still, the uneasiness wouldn't leave her. One evening, while they were having dinner, she asked gently, "Kwame, why do you always hide your phone from me?" He didn't get defensive or angry. Instead, he let out that charming laugh that always disarmed her and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You worry too much, my love. It's just business. Nothing for you to stress about." The way he said it sounded so casual, so confident, that Zuri felt silly for even asking. But her best friend Amina wasn't so easily convinced. Amina had known Zuri since childhood and could read her like an open book. When Zuri confessed her worries, Amina didn't laugh. She frowned and shook her head. "Something isn't right," she said firmly. "A man who loves you should never make you feel like you're imagining. Be careful, Zuri." Zuri wanted to believe her friend, but love has a way of clouding judgment. She remembered all the moments when Kwame was tender with her, the surprise flowers, the way he always pulled out her chair, the sweet texts that made her heart flutter. She clung to those memories, convincing herself that Amina was just being overprotective. Besides, the wedding was fast approaching. Invitations had been sent, the venue booked, and her family was buzzing with excitement. She couldn't bear the thought of doubting the man she was about to marry, so she brushed the red flags aside and smiled through the doubts. Whenever Kwame laughed off her questions, she told herself it was just her nerves. Whenever Amina gave her those worried looks, she changed the subject. Love, after all, was about trust, and she was determined to trust the man who held her future in his hand. What Zuri didn't realize was that every whispered phone call, every unanswered question, was a warning. And the more she ignored them, the deeper she walked into a story she wasn't prepared for. For now, though, she chose to silence the small voice inside her that whispered, "Something is wrong." It was a quiet Thursday evening when Zuri stopped by Kwame's apartment. The two of them had been spending more time together lately, planning details of the wedding and finalizing guest list. Kwame had cooked dinner, spicy chicken stew with rice, and the smell filled the small apartment with warmth. After eating, they curled up on the couch, Zuri resting her head on his shoulder while he flipped through TV channels. Everything felt calm, almost ordinary, the kind of night that reminded her why she loved him so much. In the middle of their laughter, Zuri's phone buzzed. It was a business call she couldn't ignore. She excused herself quickly, grabbed her phone, and headed toward the balcony. But in her rush, she didn't notice that she hadn't locked the screen after ending the call. Her phone slipped from her hand onto the couch, face down, still recording. It was a small, careless mistake, something she wouldn't have thought twice about. On the balcony, Zuri spoke politely and professionally, her voice low as she discussed work matters. Inside, Kwame didn't know the phone was still listening. He leaned back on the couch, scrolling through his own phone, sending messages, and soon after, making a call. His tone changed completely, shifting from the sweet, gentle man Zuri knew into someone colder, sharper. Zuri was still outside, pacing slowly as she finished her conversation, unaware of what was happening just a few feet away. Her heart was focused on work, her mind already drifting back to the wedding plans waiting for her inside. To her, it was just another night, another call, nothing important. But the phone she left behind was busy collecting the truth, she had been blind to for months. By the time she walked back in, smiling softly at Kwame, the moment felt unchanged. He looked up at her with that same charming smile, patting the space beside him. She slipped back onto the couch, resting her head against him again, not realizing that her phone had captured a piece of his real self, the one he never showed her. The night ended sweetly, with kisses on the cheek and promises of tomorrow. Zuri went home feeling loved, carrying the warmth of his embrace with her. Her phone was tucked in her purse, silent and unnoticed, holding a secret she wasn't ready to face yet. She had no idea that a simple mistake, dropping her phone on the couch instead of carrying it outside, would soon unravel everything. That quiet Thursday evening would become the moment her life split in two, before she knew the truth, and after she could never unhear it. That night, when Zuri finally got home, she slipped off her heels and sank onto her bed. The city outside was quiet, and she wanted nothing more than to relax before sleeping. She plugged in her phone, scrolling through messages, and then noticed something strange. Her recorder app was still running. Confused, she tapped play, expecting to hear her own voice from the business call she had taken at Kwame's apartment. At first, that's exactly what it was, her polite tone, her work discussion, the hum of Kigali in the background. But then her call ended, and a different voice filled the room. Kwame's. Her heart jumped, and she sat up straighter, gripping the phone. His voice was low but clear. "She's so naive," he said with a sharp laugh. Zuri froze. He wasn't talking about business. He wasn't talking about love. "She has no idea," he continued, his tone smug, confident, almost cruel. "Once we're married, all her family's money will be mine. Every last coin. She'll never see it coming." Zuri's mouth went dry. She pressed the phone harder against her ear, as if maybe she had misheard. But the words were undeniable. And then came the sound that cut her deeper than a knife: laughter. Kwame's laughter, mixed with a woman's voice. The woman spoke, playful and mocking. "You're terrible, Kwame. What if she finds out?" "She won't," Kwame replied quickly. "Zuri is blinded by love. She believes every word I say. She's desperate to marry me. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late." The woman laughed again. Zuri's hand shook as she listened. She recognized the name that slipped through the recording: Lindayu. A name Kwame had never mentioned, not once. The sound of them together, mocking her, turned Zuri's stomach. She replayed it twice, then a third time, tears rolling down her cheeks as the reality hit her harder each time. This wasn't just suspicion. This wasn't her imagination. It was betrayal, clear as day, dripping from every word, every laugh. Zuri curled into herself on the bed, clutching the phone like it was both poison and proof. The man she had trusted with her heart, her future, her family's pride, was plotting to use her like a key to wealth. The same smile that charmed her relatives, the same hands that held her gently, were hiding a scheme to destroy her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to call him right that second and demand answers. But her body felt frozen, her chest tight with disbelief. The recording kept echoing in her mind. So naive. All her family's money will be mine. In that moment, Zuri's world cracked open. The fairy tale she thought she was living shattered into pieces. And all she was left with was the sound of cold laughter, and a truth she could never unhear. Zuri barely slept that night. She lay in bed with her phone clutched in her hand, the recording playing over and over until the words burned into her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kwame's smile. The same smile he used when he told her she was his everything. The same smile he used when he introduced her to his friends. But now, all she could hear was his voice calling her naive. Her world felt like it had collapsed in seconds. The love story she had bragged about to her friends, the engagement she thought was a dream come true, suddenly looked like a carefully planned lie. She remembered the times he hid his phone, the whispers she pretended not to notice, the excuses she let slide. They all lined up in her memory, now like flashing red warning signs she had chosen to ignore. The tears wouldn't stop. She buried her face in her pillow and cried until her chest hurt. Her heart felt like it had been ripped open, not just by betrayal, but by shame. How could she have been so blind? How could she have ignored Amina's warnings? She replayed every moment in her mind, the flowers, the sweet messages, the way he looked at her in public. Was it all an act? Did he ever love her, or was it always about the money? For a moment, Zuri wanted to call him and scream. She wanted to expose him right away, to demand why he would do this to her. But something deep inside stopped her. Confronting him immediately would give him the chance to lie again, to twist her words, to hide the evidence. He was smart, smooth, and practiced. If she faced him now, she might lose the chance to truly uncover the truth. So instead, Zuri wiped her tears and sat up. Her face was swollen, her body exhausted, but her mind began to shift. She couldn't let him win. If Kwame thought she was naive, if he thought she was blind, then maybe that could become her greatest weapon. She would let him believe she knew nothing, let him keep playing his game, while she quietly prepared her own. Her heart still ached, and the pain didn't vanish overnight. She cried again, sometimes in silence, sometimes with muffled sobs that filled her empty apartment. But in between the tears, a seed of determination began to grow. She wasn't going to confront him, not yet. She wasn't going to warn him or tip him off. Instead, she would wait. She would watch. And when the time was right, she would strike. That night, Zuri promised herself one thing. If Kwame thought she was too naive to see the truth, then he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next morning, Zuri woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy heart, but her mind was sharper than ever. She knew the recording alone wasn't enough. Kwame could deny it, twist the story, or claim it was a misunderstanding. If she was going to expose him, she needed proof he couldn't escape from. And she knew exactly who to call first, Amina. When Zuri told her everything, Amina's face hardened with anger. "I knew something was off," she said, her voice low but fierce. "But this? Using you for money? He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you." Zuri nodded, tears threatening to fall again, but she held them back. "I can't let him know I've found out," she whispered. "I need to catch him fully. I need evidence." That's when Amina suggested Matoni, Zuri's younger cousin. Matoni was quiet, clever, and always tinkering with computers and phones. If anyone could dig deeper into Kwame's secrets, it was her. So the three of them met secretly at Zuri's apartment, the air heavy with both fear and determination. Matoni got straight to work. She connected Zuri's phone, explaining how deleted messages weren't always truly gone. Hours passed as she tapped on her laptop, her face lit up by the glow of the screen. Zuri sat anxiously with Amina, sipping tea she barely tasted, her leg bouncing restlessly. Finally, Matoni looked up. "I found something," she said. Zuri's stomach flipped. Matoni handed her the phone, and what she saw made her heart break all over again. There were dozens of messages between Kwame and a woman saved as L. The name was short, but Zuri didn't need to guess. She knew it was Lindayo. The texts were cruel, mocking, and cold. "Don't worry, baby. Once the wedding is done, her money is ours. She's so desperate, she'll never suspect a thing. I'll make sure her family trusts me completely before we strike." Zuri's hands trembled as she scrolled through conversation after conversation. The two of them laughed about her love, about her future. They even talked about which bank accounts they would drain first. Lindayo had written, "We'll be set for life. You just have to play the loving fiancé a little longer." And Kwame had replied with a heart emoji, as if betrayal was just another joke. Every word felt like a knife, but strangely, Zuri didn't break down this time. Instead, anger steadied her. Betrayal burned, but it also lit a fire in her chest. She looked at Amina, then at Matoni, and her voice came out calm, steady, almost chilling. "He will never see this coming." That night, Zuri saved every message, every screenshot, every piece of evidence. The pain was still there, sharp and deep, but it no longer controlled her. She wasn't just a broken-hearted fiancée anymore. She was a woman with a plan. And Kwame, who thought he was so clever, was about to find out what it meant to underestimate her. Zuri became an actress in her own life. Every morning, she put on the mask of a happy bride-to-be, even when her heart ached with betrayal. She smiled at Kwame, held his hand in public, and let him kiss her forehead while everyone around them whispered about how perfect they looked together. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. But inside, Zuri carried a storm. She laughed at his jokes even when they made her sick. She let him talk about the wedding, nodding along as if she were excited about flowers and table settings. She even sent him sweet messages during the day, the same way she used to, just to keep him convinced that she was still blind to the truth. It was painful, pretending to love a man she now hated, but Zuri reminded herself every day. This was not weakness, it was strategy. Meanwhile, Kwame grew bolder. Around his friends, he bragged about his foolproof plan. Zuri sometimes overheard snippets when they thought she wasn't listening. "By the time the ink dries on the marriage papers, I'll be rich," Kwame would say, laughing while his friends clapped him on the back. They teased him, calling Zuri his golden ticket, and Kwame soaked it all in like a king in his court. What he didn't know was that Zuri had her phone hidden in her bag, recording everything. Every cruel word, every arrogant boast, every moment of mockery. She captured them all. Sometimes it was small things, like him telling Lindayo over the phone, "She's so easy to trick, it's almost boring." Other times it was bigger, like detailed talks about how they would move her inheritance into accounts overseas. At night, Zuri would replay the recordings with Amina and Matoni by her side. Each time they listened, the evidence grew stronger, the betrayal deeper, but so did Zuri's resolve. She was building a case, brick by brick, word by word. It wasn't just about exposing Kwame anymore. It was about showing everyone who he truly was, so he could never escape the shame of his lies. Still, it wasn't easy. Some nights, when she was alone, Zuri broke down. Pretending took a toll. It hurt to let him hold her, to hear him call her my love, knowing those words were empty. but she forced herself to endure it, because she knew the end was coming. She wasn't the naive girl he thought she was anymore. She was watching, recording, waiting. And so the days passed. To Kwame, everything was going according to plan. He strutted around with confidence, telling himself he had already won. But to Zuri, every fake smile was a step closer to victory. She was no longer the victim. She was the hunter, and Kwame had no idea the trap was closing in on him. The day everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The wedding was held at the beautiful Lake Kivu Resort, the kind of place that looked like a dream. The sun sparkled on the water, the flowers were arranged in tall crystal vases, and the hall was filled with laughter, music, and the bright colors of Rwandan fashion. Family and friends from near and far had gathered, their faces glowing with excitement. To them, this was the perfect union of two young people deeply in love. Zuri walked into the hall in her gown, looking radiant, calm, and graceful. Guests whispered about how stunning she was, how lucky Kwame must be. Kwame stood at the altar in his tailored suit, smiling proudly, waving at people like a man who had everything under control. To him, the day was the grand finale of his plan, but to Zuri, it was the stage for his downfall. The ceremony moved smoothly, songs, blessings, and warm speeches. Finally, it was time for the vows. The priest asked them to face each other, and Kwame took Zuri's hand, ready to seal his victory. But then, Zuri gave a small nod to the DJ in the corner. The music stopped. The hall grew quiet. Guests looked around in confusion. And then it happened. Kwame's own voice boomed through the speakers, filling every corner of the hall. She's so naive. Once we're married, all her family's money will be mine. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a second, no one moved. Then came the gasps. Whispers spread across the room like wildfire. Some guests covered their mouths in shock. Others turned to look at Kwame with wide eyes. The recording continued, clear and undeniable. Kwame laughing, bragging. She'll never see it coming. By the time she knows, it'll be too late. Laughter followed, the cold, mocking sound of a man who thought he was untouchable. Kwame's confident smile melted off his face. He looked around wildly, sweat forming on his forehead. No, this is not what it sounds like, he stammered, his voice shaking. But no one was listening. His friends who once cheered for him now shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet his eyes. His family bowed their heads in shame. Zuri stood tall, her eyes fixed on him, calm and unshaken. She didn't need to say a word. The recording said it all. The man who had paraded himself as the perfect fiancé was exposed in front of everyone. The whispers grew louder. Did you hear that? He was using her. What a disgrace. The proud, confident Kwame who had dreamed of this moment was now drowning in humiliation. And Zuri? She simply stood there, the picture of strength and dignity, while her betrayer crumbled under the weight of his own words. The wedding meant to mark her beginning with Kwame had instead become his public destruction. Kwame's face turned pale as the last words of the recording echoed across the hall. The man who had walked in so confidently now looked like a cornered animal. He raised his hands and tried to force a laugh. This is fake. Someone is trying to ruin me. You all know I would never say such a thing. His voice cracked as he spoke, and the charm he once used so easily was gone. But Zuri was ready. Calmly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed screenshots of his conversations with Lindai, every cruel message, every plan to take her inheritance, every mocking word. She handed the papers to the priest, who scanned them with disbelief before passing them to the nearest guests. Soon, the evidence was moving through the crowd like fire. Murmurs rose higher with every page. Kwame's mother buried her face in her hand. His father shook his head slowly, unable to look at him. Friends who once stood by his side stepped back, ashamed. Even his closest groomsmen whispered, Kwame, how could you? The room that had once been filled with celebration now felt heavy with disgust. And then came the second blow. Zuri pulled out her phone, scrolling to another recording. Kwame's voice filled the speakers again, this time with Lindai's laughter joining in. We'll be set for life, she said. She has no idea. The hall gasped again. People began pointing, their eyes searching the crowd. And there she was, Lindai, dressed elegantly in the back row, her face draining of color as the whispers reached her. She's part of it, someone shouted. All eyes turned to her, and the shame was unbearable. Lindai clutched her purse, trying to slip away unnoticed, but the room was already buzzing with judgment. She hurried toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor, her head bowed as people shook their heads at her. By the time she disappeared, her reputation was already in ruins. Kwame tried one last time, his voice desperate now. Zuri, please, you have to believe me. It's all lies. I love you. But the words sounded empty, weak, and false. He looked around for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one stepped forward, not even his family. Zuri, standing tall in her wedding gown, looked him straight in the eye. You thought I was blind, but I was listening the whole time. Her voice was steady, strong, and full of finality. The crowd erupted into whispers again, but this time it wasn't about pity for her. It was about the downfall of the man who thought he could deceive everyone. Kwame's shoulders slumped. The pride that once carried him was gone. He stood alone in the middle of the hall, humiliated, abandoned, and stripped of the image he had built. The wedding that was supposed to crown him had instead destroyed him. And Zuri, calm and unbroken, had turned his greatest day into his deepest disgrace. Zuri didn't stay to watch Kwame crumble any further. She had seen enough. With her gown flowing behind her, she turned and walked out of the hall, her heels clicking against the floor. Guests parted quietly, some whispering in awe, others clapping softly as if to honor her strength. She didn't shed a single tear. Instead, she felt lighter, freer, as though the weight of months of lies had finally lifted off her shoulders. Outside, the fresh air from Lake Kivu brushed against her face. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and kept walking. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about Kwame. She wasn't thinking about shame or heartbreak. She was thinking about herself, about her courage, her freedom, and her future. In the weeks that followed, Zuri refused to let betrayal define her. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose. With Amina by her side, she started a support group for women who had been betrayed, manipulated, or deceived. The meetings quickly grew, filled with voices sharing stories, healing, and finding strength together. What had once been her deepest wound became her most powerful weapon to help others. People who had once pitted Zuri now admired her. She wasn't just the woman who exposed a liar at the altar. She was the woman who refused to be broken by it. And whenever she was asked how she managed to uncover the truth, Zuri would smile with quiet pride and deliver the final line that had become her signature. He thought I was blind, but I was recording.